Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers. You are in season 5 of Wrestling at Random, where the theme is more wrestling than ever before. Some 19,000 professional wrestling shows dumped into the randomizer. I'm already laughing right now, just thinking about the fact that there are 19,000 some odd shows that the randomizer could have chosen, upwards of 50, 60,000 hours of professional wrestling. We often talk about the randomizer and how it's legit. It's not gimmicked. That is true. However, I will completely understand, and I'm sure you will as well, Jeremy, if people do not believe us, particularly people who follow us on the bonus feed, where a patron some months ago selected WWE SmackDown November 19th, 2010. Why would they have selected that for us to watch and intentionalizer over at our bonus feed? Because we talk quite often about the ridiculousness of Kane lore, Paul Bearer lore. Throw the Undertaker in the mix as well. We have said that if someone paid us enough money, we would do a podcast detailing the completely nonsensical, convoluted lore of those three characters. So
the nonsensical oral history at some point has to be done. Yes,
it does have to be done. So that patron chose for us to watch this episode of SmackDown on the bonus feed, which had a completely absurd, show-long, over-the-top storyline of babyface Edge kidnapping heel Paul Bearer, who was the kayfabe father of Kane, and the entire episode is basically just skits and sketches of Edge, quote unquote, torturing Paul Bearer in completely ridiculous ways. Light torture with pizza and dodgeball and such. One of the most absurd things we've ever watched in five seasons on the free feed, or 100 on the bonus feed. So the randomizer did what it did, legitimately pulled an episode of a wrestling show for us to watch this week. I look, it's SmackDown. It's November 2010. It's November 26th, 2010. At this point, it is not even entering into my mind that this is, in fact, the following week's SmackDown from that show that was requested for us to watch on the bonus feed. I fire up SmackDown, and immediately I text you and say, oh my God, you are not going to believe what the randomizer did to/for us. How is a legitimately random selection the week after that horrendously absurd episode of SmackDown that we had on the bonus feed?
Let me give a little peek behind the curtain to our listeners here of how the show works. So over in the bonus feed, in May of 2023, a patron requested that we watch SmackDown from November 19th, 2010. They're part of the intentionalized tier. They get to choose a show for us to watch. That's the show they chose. We reviewed it, episode 129 of the bonus feed. We are currently at episode 161 at the time of this recording of the bonus feed. So this was chosen May of 2023. In March of 2024, I give the randomizer a spin. We're like, hey, let's give it a couple spins so we know what to watch for the next 3 weeks. And we give it a couple spins. We've got this one. And this was just a random SmackDown on the list of 3 that it pulled. It pulled a SmackDown. It pulled what did we have last week?
The Mid-South episode.
Mid-South. And we've got what's coming up next week. So just have these 3. And so I didn't make the connection that of all of the internet's wrestling content, it literally picked November 26th, 2010, which is the week after the episode we reviewed. When you texted me like, oh my God, this episode, I'm like, I never look at the card ahead of time. I let the episode wash over me so that I can parachute in like I'm someone who just flipped on the channel here in 2010 and I want to see what's going on. And I immediately knew where we were and what was happening because I had watched the week prior, even though we watched it months ago. we will never forget what we
Oh
saw.
no, that is for better or worse, and I think you know which the way that falls. One of the most memorable episodes of wrestling TV that we've watched. And just to pull back the curtain a little bit more, just so people understand that the randomizer again is legitimate. We have, you said, 19,000 some odd entries of wrestling, whether it be TV, pay-per-view, shows, stuff that's on WWE Network, YouTube, New Japan World, private collections that we have access to. You have a spreadsheet that has every single episode, every single possible wrestling show. It has a number attached to it. You run a random number generator. That is the randomizer.
That's the randomizer.
And the number that corresponds to that show is what we watch. And that, out of all the entries, if you think of needles in a haystack, what are the odds? I'm going to do some quick math here. 1 divided by 19,000. So that is like 0.00052% chance of getting that episode. And that's what we got less than a year after an intentionalizer chose the previous week's episode. Completely ridiculous.
The only thing that would be more ridiculous is if we got the week before the episode that we watched. Yes. Thank God we got the week after at least, because it's also the week. It's the week after, but it's also after the Survivor Series pay-per-view 2010. So this was at least a show where it wasn't like we were going to know what happened the following week. We actually were able to.
I swear to God, if the randomizer picks before the end of season 5, Survivor Series 2010, there is a ghost in the machine.
A bug or a feature.
It is haunted by Paul Bearer.
So yeah, let's take a look here. If you want to watch the episode we're going to review, you can find it on Peacock, on Netflix, on WWE Network at the time of this recording. Season 12, episode 48 of SmackDown. It's officially titled WWE Friday Night SmackDown at this point. And yeah, here we are. This is in Jacksonville, Florida. Adam, this show drew 3,000 fans.
Yeah, I was going to say, watching this visually, it is striking how different this looks than, modern, as we record this in 2024, boom period WWE. It is also striking how similar this looks to, I would say, like 2023 weekly AEW television in terms of the way it is shot. We have the color lighting on the crowd, so you can't necessarily see empty seats standing out. It's clearly shot in a way to show the side of the building that the tickets are sold. The hard camera side, there are clearly very few tickets sold, and it's a small building to begin with.
Yeah, 3,000 fans in Jacksonville. This was not a one-off either. This was a tough period of drawing for the WWE here in November of 2010.
Particularly for the SmackDown side, if I remember correctly, they drew very poorly during this era because this was full brand split.
Yeah, and you have your announce team. It's a 3-man booth, Adam.
Right.
We spent a lot of time on that Patreon bonus episode talking about how awful the announcing was, and we get more of it here as your lead play-by-play guy is Todd Grisham. You have your color commentator as Matt Stryker, and then third man in the booth is Michael Cole.
Yes, and it's Michael Cole doing sort of a degree, maybe a slightly lesser degree of his extremely overbearing heel persona of this time, but he still is leaning heel. He's there essentially to babysit Todd Grisham Phillips to make sure that that he's not too terrible. Longtime listeners will understand the Todd Grisham Phillips reference. I just, you think about the stages of grief that I went through as I realized what we were watching. As I first realized this was the week after that horrendously, ridiculously absurd episode of SmackDown, which maybe of all the shows we've watched is the least wrestling show we've ever seen.
Besides the movie we reviewed.
That actually had more in-ring action or more compelling in-ring action. True. I would watch Body Slam for the wrestling over the wrestling we had on that November 19th SmackDown. But then to realize that my ears were going to be assaulted for 2 hours by the idiocy of Todd Grisham, the forced loquaciousness, dare I say, to use the type of words he would use incorrectly, of Matt Stryker, and then just like bored, crapping on everything, heel Michael Cole. This is like, when you talk about the darkest periods of the 19 year monopoly that WWE had on mainstream American professional wrestling, because I don't put TNA in the same bin as mainstream American professional wrestling. It's really the exact midpoint of that monopoly period. And it is like all of the worst tendencies of not having real legitimate competition shining through every aspect of this television program.
Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer newsletter, reports, right now, Todd Grisham is not getting high marks, which is why they moved Cole to SmackDown.
You don't say. Was right now needed? Were the marks ever high for Todd Grisham Phillips?
Lawler and Cole don't like working with Stryker. Cole, during the Survivor Series, at one point, took off his headset to yell at Stryker for talking too much. And this was before the blown call at the end. Punk may end up with the spot, but that would leave 3 Raw announcers, and the idea they don't want to make SmackDown seem so much like the B team may be the thing saving Stryker. So Punk actually did do commentary over on the Raw side while he was injured, and so they had Stryker stay on and Cole move over to SmackDown. So
this could not possibly have felt more like the B team and the B show. This, this had Thunder vibes. This had Rampage vibes. We'll get into it. What 2 hours of sports entertainment, and I use that term very specifically here.
The show opens with your world heavyweight champion Kane coming out. So he's still the champion.
Fails to throw me off.
Yes, he is still the champion. He took on Edge at Survivor Series and left with the championship. He talks about Edge, how he was humiliating and torturing Paul Bearer at the Survivor Series. He overcame Edge and is still the world champion. Edge is still in possession of Paul Bearer, who he kidnapped now 3 weeks ago.
No one has alerted the authorities to this. Also, we should note, it's just so strange. Kane is just talking in a normal person voice. He is reading these horrendous scripted lines in the most, it's just, overriding thought during this period of promos in WWE is I can't imagine as a fan anything that anyone said on this show, but particularly here from Kane, eliciting any real human emotion in me, the viewer, because they are so obviously scripted. Everyone talks the same on this show. It's as if, and that's probably because it's true, everyone had their lines written by the exact same people in the exact same way.
I will. So, yes, this is a weird Kane, nearly babyface Kane promo here, pleading for Edge to give Paul Bearer back. He wants his father back for the holidays. It's Thanksgiving. The holidays are coming up, and finally Edge comes out to end this speech of 10 minutes too late. But I will give credit to Kane for, and I think I said the exact same thing on the last show we did. He did a fine job doing the job he was asked to do, delivering these lines. They were terrible, but him delivering them in the best way he could possibly do with this, with what he was given.
I suppose it just, you mentioned how babyface his promo was. If you recall, Jeremy, and for those patrons that are listening, and if not, feel free to support us at patreon.com/wrestling@random and check this the previous episode out. It took me the entirety of that episode of SmackDown, and afterward, when you described, I think, like what Dave Meltzer wrote about the storyline, to actually understand and figure out that Kane is the heel here, and Edge is the baby face. It's a little bit more obvious here, not because the content is any different, but because so much of what happens with the characters on this episode happens in front of the crowd out in the arena or in the ring. So we hear the crowd reaction, hear the cheering, hear the booing, even though them reacting this way to each of these guys makes no sense. We're at least getting those cues.
So they start yelling at each other. Kane wants him to give him back. Edge has an empty wheelchair with him, and he says, all you got to do is ask. And Edge asks for him to ask politely, makes him say please, and Kane obliges each step of the way, and then Edge says not sincere enough and just leaves, and Kane is fuming. This was a long opening segment, and not good.
It was a long opening segment, and it was also one of those things where it reminds you, on top of just the verbiage, like that they actually were hiring legit soap opera writers, because even the production of the segment where Edge says what he says, he said, Kane is fuming, and he just stands there for what felt like 2 years, but it was probably no more than 5 seconds. But as the camera lingers on him, just shaking his head back and forth before it fades to black, total soap opera style.
So this show is a show-long story continuing the Edge, Paul Bearer, Kane thing, and all in-ring action will be King of the Ring tournament qualifiers.
That always bothered me, by the way, tournament qualifiers, because all tournament qualifiers
round.
It's the first round of the tournament without calling it that. I've never understood why they do that. The other thing we'll get into as we go through is that at least 2 of, and maybe all of these, but at least 2 of these qualifying matches are rematches from the pay-per-view that just took place 5 days prior. What?
Yeah, it's basically they took the 2 teams that competed in the Survivor Series match and then just matched them up into singles matches as part of the King of the Ring tournament.
We did not have Survivor Series 2010, did we? I know we had a Survivor Series from around this time period. That was like 2012, maybe. Like, I feel like there was an Alberto Del Rio Survivor Series, and he's all over this show as well.
Yeah, we did not have 2010, thank goodness. If you go back in our archives, you can see all of the Survivor Series we've reviewed. Survivor Series 89, I think, is my favorite Survivor Series podcast we've reviewed here on the free feed. So the opening contest, King of the Ring qualifying match, a.k.a. first round of the King of the Ring tournament. The actual King of the Ring tournament will take place next week on Raw, and I will provide at the end of this podcast what happened in the King of the Ring tournament
on Raw. So again, just in case you weren't aware that this is the B show and Raw is the A show, Raw will have a King of the Ring tournament one night with Raw and SmackDown wrestlers.
King of the Ring qualifying match. It's Kofi Kingston taking on Jack Swagger, who has a mascot with him, a guy in an eagle costume.
Was this a regular thing? Was this because it was Thanksgiving and it was a playoff, the gobbledygooker? I have no recollection of this.
It was building towards that being a joke reveal that Chavo Guerrero was underneath the eagle as a gobbledygooker play, that Hector Guerrero was the original gobbledygooker, but they gave up on this, and so this Hornswoggle segment we'll get to later is the end of the eagle. Was that
the write-off?
That's the write-off of the eagle, yeah.
It was a good idea to give up on this, because I'm sure, and I say this tongue planted firmly in cheek, that referencing the gobbledygooker, which was like 21 or 22 years prior to this, would have really resonated with this fan base, which is basically all kids.
Yes.
None of these kids were even born during this time period. As the match is getting underway, we find out that the representatives from the Raw side, they've already advanced out of the qualifiers, which again is just the first round of the tournament. It is Daniel Bryan, who we know and love as Bryan Danielson,
which is
John
US
Morrison.
Champion. He's your U.S. champion as well.
He's the United States champion. John Morrison, Sheamus, and Michael Cole's pick to win the entire tournament. And the reasoning behind this is Michael Cole says no one has seen him before, which is burying your tertiary product here that they're about to describe. Ezekiel Jackson was the last ever ECW world champion, and Michael Cole predicts he will go on to win the King of the Ring.
We reviewed ECW from 2010. That's also in the back catalog of this free feed right here. You can listen to us review ECW in 2010. Oof.
Which has an all-timer of a 6-man team, a 3-man team, and a 6-man tag team match, somehow not booked by Tenryu, as it was Goldust, Hurricane, and Yoshitatsu.
Yep. So back to Jack Swagger and Kofi Kingston. This match was really good. I really thought that I enjoyed this match a lot.
It was good.
Yeah.
I feel like really good is being
in the context of this
by,
show. In the context
well,
of
in
this
the context of this show, it was Misawa Kawada 6394. Yes. But in the context of professional wrestling, this was a good television match on a show that could otherwise barely be labeled professional wrestling. Swagger looked far better than I think you would think of him being in modern times. Kofi Kingston was totally fine here. This was a good TV match.
Yeah, when looking at what you got on SmackDown in the year 2010,
yes,
this is a really good match.
Oh, it is a good match. Yes.
Kofi gets slingshot to the corner. He leaps to the middle rope, jumps back, twists into a crossbody for 2. Kofi doesn't clear Swagger on a leapfrog, and Swagger goes to work on the leg. He's in control for a while. This match felt like it was 20 minutes long. It was the last couple of minutes of this match were awesome. Basically as I'm going through this, I'm like, oh my God, this is so slow and boring, particularly when Swagger is in control. The last few minutes of this were legitimately great though. Yeah, Kofi makes a comeback. He gets a near fall after the boom drop, which is a wacky leg drop thing into the corner.
It's a double. So he sets Swagger up, and I don't think it's always this way, but Swagger ends up like draped over the bottom rope in the corner, like full body, like he's reverse planked on the bottom rope in the corner. And Kofi hits it. It's basically the Sabu or Ernie Ladd double leg drop here.
I like it. Kofi does a top rope crossbody, but Swagger catches him in midair, turns it into a power slam. He tries a Vader bomb, but Kofi gets the boots up. Kofi tries a kick, but Swagger got the ankle and turns it into the ankle lock, but they're both in the ropes. Kofi counters the ankle lock by running Swagger headfirst into the buckle. Kofi hits his Trouble in Paradise kick, and Kofi gets the win, and he will advance in the King of the Ring tournament.
Yeah, very good last couple of minutes. Fun match. Matt Striker was terrible. Again, just says stuff just to say stuff. Just makes stuff up. Does not know the meaning of words. The match is over, and he says, direct quote, Kofi won because he showed the attrition. No. That does not make sense. That is word salad.
Kane in the back with general manager of SmackDown, Teddy Long. Kane apologizes for wrecking his office and intimidating him last week. Edge shows up on a TV screen in Teddy's office, and he says he has Paul Bearer tied up. And the best part of this is when he takes the tape off of the mouth of Paul Bearer, and he just starts screaming, "You're a bastard!" Paul Bearer is... I can't imagine how horrible these segments would be if we didn't have the awesome performance of Paul Bearer. We talked about it on the show that we reviewed on the bonus feed. We're talking about it now. Paul Bearer delivers a tremendous performance in all of these skits.
Oh yeah, imagine if this was some other random manager. Just imagine this exact angle. But instead of Paul Bearer, Kane's father is Truth Martini.
Former listener.
It's just one example. I hate these backstage segments where there's a TV that somehow is also the world's biggest and earliest iPad and is interactive. It's not good. Kane, again, like the verbiage here is horrendous. Direct quote, Teddy Long says, I barely knew my father, but that I barely knew my father either, Kane, but that didn't stop me from reaching for the stars. Who talks like this?
Kane goes to find Edge. He finds the bathroom that Edge wheeled Paul Bearer into, but all he finds is an empty wheelchair and a sign that says "Gone Fishing." Alberto Del Rio is interviewed by Josh Matthews. He has nothing to say. He just says he's going to win and become the King of the Ring. Nothing here.
He'll be wrestling the Big Show later, which is another rematch from the Survivor Series just 5 days prior. We then get a did you know all these things where it's like the try hard. We're so cool. We're so mainstream. We're so relevant. We're so important. That flashes on the screen, and it's did you know WWE's debut event in China won a prestigious commemorative plate of appreciation. Okay. That is then followed up by, we hear a ton throughout the show of go to WWE.com, go to WWE.com. We see a screenshot of WWE.com, which has maybe the worst dad joke headline of an article I've ever seen, where it says, this is coming out of the Survivor Series. It is a picture of Edge, and it describes him in the headline as the irritated R superstar.
Ugh. King of the Ring qualifying match. Ricardo Rodriguez introduces Alberto Del Rio, and he comes out in a Rolls Royce, gets his big introduction, and I always the presentation of Alberto Del Rio, they did everything right. Every time I see him, I'm like, they did everything they could. He just didn't have it, just for a lot of reasons, but kudos to them for putting together a real big presentation for him every time.
Yeah, it was a 10 out of 10 production or presentation for a guy that at his best was a 7 out of 10 as a star, and through his own problems and vices kind of made himself a 0 out of 10.
His opponent is the Big Show, and it's all Big Show early. Del Rio drop kicks the leg of Show, starts working over his leg, but Big Show in the corner, and Del Rio comes running in. He hits a cool-looking running enziguri. This was a cool-looking move.
Yeah, running step-up enziguri in the corner. One of the cool things he would do. They're like things or flashes of Alberto Del Rio that were good. They clearly wanted him to be like a modern Ted DiBiase, sort of in some ways combined with what they had done with JBL a few years prior. But yeah, it didn't quite work. We should also note this is the Knuckleheads era Big Show, where he's like a big goofy comedian. I believe he appeared on SNL at one point during this time as well, for a cameo. So this is, again, like there's so many weird sub characters of the Big Show in the WWE. We had, what was it, that episode of Raw where he was like it was like a skyscrapers duo with him and The Undertaker.
Him and The Undertaker, that's right.
There was like him wearing like FUBU stuff. There's just so many different versions of the Big Show.
They end up fighting outside. Rodriguez, the ring announcer, tries to hold Big Show's leg to keep him out. He eats the knockout punch by the Big Show, but the Big Show is counted out of the ring anyway, and Alberto Del Rio will advance to the King of the Ring.
The Big Show has to have, like, if you go by percentage of matches versus countouts or other lame finishes, it's got to be the highest percentage in WWF/WWE history. Also, probably the highest number of turns, face and heel. And I guess it's better than early on in his run where they would just beat him clean all the time. They just always find the most ridiculous ways to beat him without actually beating him.
Do you remember the match we reviewed where he stepped through a table and lost a tables match because
Yes,
of it?
that's what was in my head, and that, granted, was maybe not completely planned, but yeah, just so many odd, unsatisfying finishes with the Big Show.
Edge has Paul Bearer up on the concourse. He wants Kane to come out so they can have a chat. So Kane's on the stage. Edge is up kind of by where the luxury boxes are, between the lower concourse and the luxury boxes.
And they had to be very careful shooting this because, again, this arena was nowhere near full.
No.
So they were very careful in terms of where they placed the cameras and what direction they were shooting.
Yeah, and I'm always a fan of when you use the arena as a character in what's happening, right? I'm a big fan of that, and we got it here, so I do like that production idea and production note.
Well, and it also makes the show not just feel like it's happening in the same building every week. You do stuff like this, and you see as a fan that this isn't happening in the Impact Zone.
Edge threatens to throw Paul Bearer down the stairs to the 100 level, and Paul Bearer is screaming, "I hate all of you people," and he's just ranting at the people, and I was howling with laughter.
That's it's funny, the difference between the previous week's episode of SmackDown, where it's just Paul Bearer like being borderline comedically tortured, and what's such a weird sentence to say, it's also such a Vince McMahon thing.
Mm-hmm.
All his vitriol was directed at Edge, whereas here this week it's hilarious because Edge has him tied up. Edge is doing all these things to him. And every time that Edge pulls the duct tape off of Paul Bearer's mouth, Paul Bearer does not say anything about hating Edge. He immediately just starts saying how much he hates the fans.
In hilarious fashion. Loved it.
Oh, completely ridiculous.
So Edge asks, should he give Paul Bearer back to Kane? And the crowd says, boo. Should I shove Paul Bearer down the steps? And the crowd cheers loudly.
Again, the babyface is going to shove this like 70-year-old man down like a flight of 50 stairs to certain death. And that is who the fans are cheering for. What a time.
Kane acquiesces, says, fine, you can have another title match. Edge says, awesome. Come up here and join us. You can have him back. Come meet us at the hot dog stand. So Kane runs after him, but when he gets through the curtain out on the concourse, it's again just an empty wheelchair. MVP versus Drew McIntyre in a King of the Ring qualifier.
MVP, who's a staple of WWE programming during this time, and then it's young Drew McIntyre, who had been both behind the cameras and on screen, had been christened the future of the company by Vince McMahon. I always forget how young Drew McIntyre, not babyface character, literally babyface Drew McIntyre, how much he looks like a tall, jacked Brian Kendrick, like exactly like Brian Kendrick. He has horrendous entrance music. We've talked about it before. There is no way a man with this entrance music can possibly get over as a main eventer.
We mention it every time we see him, but yeah, it's crazy how much Drew couldn't look more different than Drew McIntyre looks in 2024. Just the 14 years that he looks like a completely different human being. It's wild.
It's crazy. Well, yeah, I mean, you think, again, like he's tall here, he's jacked, not a hair on his body, like blondish hair, completely clean shaven. Now he's this big, burly, black hair, black goatee, chest hair, tough, mean, nasty dude. Like he is now what they tried to tell you he was 14 years ago.
The exact bookend of this is MVP, who looks exactly the same at any point in his career.
Yes, MVP is, he's the modern, this is going to be an odd comp for many reasons, but like the modern Ole Anderson or JJ Dillon, in that like they hit an age and stopped aging.
They're always that left age. Yes.
Earth. And I feel like that is exactly what the situation is with MVP as well.
Drew gets the advantage by stomping the arm of MVP on the metal stairs, and he's working over the arm of MVP. Drew tries to stomp the arm again on the steps, but MVP uses his good arm to sweep the leg out from under Drew, and he falls hitting the apron. In the ring, MVP with one arm makes a comeback. MVP hits the corner in hilarious fashion. This is just completely ridiculous. He hits the corner, and he turns around into the DDT. Drew does a big swinging leg DDT for the win, and he is advancing in the King of the Ring.
Yeah, it's the double. It's like a double underhook snap DDT. They call it the Future Shock. Whenever I see MVP, I always am reminded of his run in New Japan.
Mm-hmm.
MVP talked forever when he was in WWF, WWE in interviews, how much he loved, like not on camera, but like I see him talk how much he loved Japanese pro wrestling. Talk about Masahiro Chono was his idol. And then he finally goes to New Japan and wrestles a style so much less of a New Japan style than what he did in WWE. He was such, for me, a massive disappointment when he went to New Japan. I also just have to note, again, we're talking about commentary and how terrible Matt Striker is. This is also the era of Vince McMahon being in everyone's ear. And one of Vince McMahon's commentary edicts being, you are not allowed to use pronouns. You always have to say the wrestler's name, which leads to total absurdity, including this exact quote line from Matt Striker, where he says, again, direct quote, Drew likes to use the Future Shock DDT, where Drew double underhooks the arms of Drew's opponent. What in the world are we doing?
Swagger, Jack Swagger. He's in the back and he's yelling at the Eagle costumed mascot. And we pan over, and Hornswoggle is dressed as a Native American, and he is served a burnt turkey by Rosa Mendez.
Again, I was like, who is this person? And I know, I remembered the SmackDown from the previous week that we did like a year ago in linear fashion, if you're listening. And I remember not for the life of me being able to figure out who this was. I remembered that I couldn't remember who this was, but I could not remember who it was.
So the Eagle is sad, and he walks away, but Hornswoggle gets a look in his eye, decides he wants to eat the Eagle, hits him with a bow and arrow. This is comedy, and that's the end of the segment. That's the end of the Eagle.
One of those things where, even more so than this Edge, Kane, Paul Bearer stuff, I'm watching this and I'm thinking, if anyone I know, if anyone I love, if anyone I care about walks into the room and sees me watching this, they're going to remove themselves from my life. They will no longer respect me as a human being. This is so dumb.
Lay Cool comes out. The team of Michelle McCool and Layla. They are mad at Natalya for winning the Divas Championship at the Survivor Series. I'm watching this promo, and all I can think to myself is, Michelle McCool is the best Michelle McCool. She's tremendous at her role, at being Michelle McCool.
And that is immediately confirmed when Kelly, who is visually completely indistinguishable from Michelle McCool, comes out, but could not have less charisma. This whole thing just illustrates how far, particularly in WWE, but just in general in North America, women's wrestling and the presentation of women's wrestling has come. In that, like, this is like 90 seconds. It's total nothing. And in
it's
2010,
1 minute.
1 minute. There you go. In 2010, this would have been looked at as being a major step up from the presentation of women in the company just 5, 6, 10 years prior. And yet it is still so token and so short and so completely inessential to the program as compared to what they would be doing just a few years later.
It's unbelievable that this was progress.
Yes.
And it was still so far away from And this was 2010. Like, Shimmer had been a thing for a long time. Like,
well, think about this is progress from like the Miller Lite Girls segments on WrestleMania from just a few years prior. Like this was considered, oh wow, the women are being treated with respect now. That is how low the baseline had been for women's wrestling, if you could have even called it that 10 years prior in the WWF.
The only thing to note here, Michelle McCool hit a nice belly-to-belly suplex, but Kelly...
Great belly-to-belly suplex. Like, I was taken aback. I went all caps in my notes on that one.
Kelly gets a flash roll-up for the quick pin. Beth Phoenix she returned at Survivor Series. She comes out here, and she hits the ring post-match, and she hits the glam slam on Michelle McCool.
Yeah, again, at least, this is a period where not every single woman in a match is a barely or maybe completely untrained fitness model or bikini model that Johnny Ace found in a magazine. You know, like Natalya is a wrestler. Beth Phoenix, while she was a fitness model, was actually trained as a wrestler. So we're in the very beginning stages of what you could call something akin to progress.
We get a video package of John Cena where he was fired for losing to Randy Orton. We see clips of Cena celebrating his career with the fans. Teary-eyed
he was not
Cena.
fired. He was not fired for losing to Randy Orton. If you remember this convoluted storyline that we tried to untangle on the bonus feed in May 2023 when we did that episode.
We did.
The story was that John Cena, for some reason, was like the indentured servant of
Wade Barrett.
And
the head of Nexus at this point.
If Wade Barrett lost to Randy Orton at the Survivor Series, then at that point, that would mean that John Cena was fired.
Yes.
And the idea going into Survivor Series was, what was more important to Wade Barrett? Defeating Randy Orton for the WWE Championship or purposely losing so John Cena would get fired? That was the hook.
So John Cena ended up getting fired. And we see all these clips. We see a teary-eyed Cena saying he's going home, thanks the WWE Universe. This was a tremendous and tremendously effective video package, even though 0 people believed he was actually leaving, and there was no chance he was actually fired, but they did, knowing that this is a nothing and this is going to be blown up late. So like this aired on Raw and it was going to be blown up later on in that same episode of Raw. They did a tremendous job putting this whole thing together.
Well, Cena in particular, Cena's delivery of this retirement speech that, to your point, not a single human being, not even WWE fans in 2010 could have possibly believed this was the last time you would ever see John Cena on WWE programming. His retirement speech was so believable in that context of being completely unbelievable. In my head, I'm like, what do I equate this to? It would be like, a star player on a team. Let's say a star player on an NHL team that's just had a terrible year, and it's the final game of the season. They have no chance of making the playoffs. They have nothing to play for. The team they're playing isn't in the playoff race. They don't even have the opportunity of playing spoiler. And yet this player, let's say Sidney Crosby, goes out and gets 4 goals. Just a brilliant performance with no meaning behind it. That was John Cena here.
100%. We get the rest of the Raw rebound, which is their recap of Raw. Orton was defending the WWE Championship against Wade Barrett. Nexus jumps Orton before the bell. Orton is hurt. So he goes in hurt to this match against Barrett.
Wait, so Barrett Orton, that was a rematch from the pay-per-view,
yes,
correct?
You are correct, sir. Barrett goes to win the title. But John Cena hits the ring and attacks Wade Barrett. Randy then hits the RKO, retains the title. At this point, The Miz comes down to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase for his title shot. Miz attacks the injured already had a match, Randy Orton. He hits the skull-crushing finale, and The Miz wins the WWE Championship.
The thing that surprised me the most about this was that usually I feel like these cash-ins are the guy cashes it in and immediately hits his finisher and wins the title. From what they showed here, like Miz cashes it in and then they have a match, and Orton, while he's beaten down, almost wins. He goes to hit the RKO and Miz counters it into the skull-crushing finale. But yes, Miz is your new WWE champion. The best part of this during the video packages, we see the shot of what would go on to be, well, I would say, one of the earlier memes in WWE history. Miz Girl. We see the girl who's the angry face. I did not know. I had not put together this was that. This is where that came from. So that was tremendous, if nothing else.
So Miz would actually hold the WWE Championship into the new year, take it all the way to WrestleMania. That WrestleMania 27 at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, where The Miz defeated John Cena to retain the title because of interference from The Rock at WrestleMania 27.
Which that then set up Rock and Cena at the following year's Mania?
Yep. For the next two Manias. Yeah.
The next two Manias. Yeah. Wow.
So back to SmackDown. King of the Ring qualifier, Rey Mysterio taking on dashing Cody Rhodes in your main event.
This is your main event of SmackDown. So again, not exactly bringing the massive star power. Yes, everyone loved Rey, but Rey had been killed dead as being a main event guy. Obviously, we've talked about before him getting that world title run where Vince didn't want to put it on him, and then it was just nothing from then forward. That just did not treat him as a champion. And if you're not familiar, 2010 dashing Cody Rhodes, not a main event star by any stretch of the imagination. It is incredible watching him here, watching this one-note act, this one-note character, this guy with no knee pads and no elbow pads and no wrist tape, who really, he was fine, but he was just a dime a dozen guy that was no better or worse than any other OVW graduate of the late 2000s, other than the fact that his dad was Dusty Rhodes. You would not believe that this guy would go on to be the big star that he is obviously now.
No, it's amazing to see how far he came from 2010, where he was able to find charisma, find authenticity, find the things that this character does not have. This is a mid-card role, and he was fine, but yeah, one note is exactly how you describe this.
Well, he did not seem like he belonged or deserved anything more than that. Like, I go back to this general time period, give or take a year or two on either direction, where Cody Rhodes is teaming with Ted DiBiase Jr., or as he was referred to then, just Ted DiBiase, and we were supposed to forget who actual Ted DiBiase was. For one, I could not have imagined having a single thought or feeling or emotion about either of them, but if I had one, it would be that you could not distinguish in any way, shape, or form which of those two men had more of a future. Like, they both just seemed like mid-card decent guys who were there because of who their dads were. Like, little I would not have believed
they were just little Randy Ortons.
Yeah. Little, generic, nowhere near as charismatic Randy Ortons. The idea that one was out of the business shortly thereafter and the other would go on to be one of, if not the biggest full-time stars in the business some 14 years later is pretty crazy.
Alberto Del Rio comes out for commentary. Cody gets hit in the face early, panics, goes outside to check his mirror. This was the gimmick.
Again, one-note character. Imagine a far less muscular narcissist Lex Luger without Bobby Heenan.
Cody hits an Alabama slam, and Todd Grisham correctly called it an Alabama slam.
Shocking. The ultimate broken clock is right twice a day. Blind squirrel finds a nut. Whatever you want to say.
Cody drops a knee off the middle rope to the back of Rey. Rey knocks Cody off the top, and then a top rope seated senton from Rey. He hits the middle rope with a springboard crossbody for 2. A crossroads by Cody attempt is countered to a roll-up for a 2 count. Cody misses a dropkick. Gets kicked in the face for another 2 count.
Yeah, I had forgotten that like around this time period, Ray had sort of adopted / stolen, whatever you want to say, the Tajiri buzzsaw kick. Yep. And it made me think back to what was that pay-per-view that we watched? I believe it was in this season of the podcast. If I'm not mistaken, it was Extreme Rules 2012, or maybe it was earlier, but there was a Ray Tajiri cruiserweight title match that was awesome and was so much better than anything else on the show. And that's immediately what I thought of when Ray busted out this buzzsaw kick.
Ray goes for the 619, but Cody escapes under the bottom rope. Mysterio comes off the apron with a seated senton to Del Rio on the outside. Ref gets bumped on the inside. Del Rio crotches Ray against the ring post. Cody in the ring hits the crossroads, gets a 3 count. A fun, short little TV match, 6 minutes.
Yeah, totally fine. Certainly not a main event level match by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly Gato was watching SmackDown in 2010 match in terms of booking style. The thing I took away from this the most is that Ray, like, think about Rey Mysterio, how great he was and is still to this day at adapting to whatever the house style is of the promotion that he was in. You think of Ray, obviously in Mexico in AAA, just being the quintessential, warp speed, feels like he's beamed in from another universe luchador. His ability in ECW, him and Psychosis come in and do their match, but do it with tables and chairs. WCW being able to have matches with luchadors, but then also be able to wrestle, just traditional North American style wrestlers. And then here
we saw them in War or FMW, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Then here in the WWF seamlessly transitions into that signature move style where you don't do any innovation. You hit your spot, the top rope seated senton. Obviously the 619, where the second in any match, the wrestler, improbably his opponent, finds themselves draped over the second rope throat first. The crowd goes nuts because they know they're going to get the 619. Like, he is so good at just being whatever he needs to be ridiculously over in whatever environment he's in.
Kane is in the back with Teddy Long. Kane says Teddy is going to pay. But Edge shows up on the monitor again. He's out back. He's outside the arena in the parking lot. He's got Paul tied up in the wheelchair. Edge says, come to the parking lot before there's an accident. Kane makes his way outside the building. We then see a car come speeding into frame. The wheelchair and allegedly Paul Bearer in the wheelchair get hit by the car, but a mannequin explodes as we see the stuffing and everything here. It was actually a mannequin in the wheelchair.
Paul Bearer explodes. I was like, are they trying to tell us that this is actually Paul Bearer, or are they playing this for laughs? They're playing it for laughs. If you follow us on social media, there was only one choice for this week's GIF, and it is, in fact, that. I really like this back-to-back with the GIF from that bonus show that we did. Again, more parking lot shenanigans, cars being driven off. But yeah, this was absurd. I also love, if you watch the GIF, if you follow us on social media, the ginger stutter step that Kane does as Paul Bearer mannequin is hit by the car is delightfully absurd. I could watch that on loop endlessly and have.
At Wrestle at Random on Instagram, Twitter, X, Threads, Blue Sky, all of those locations at Wrestle at Random. After the mannequin and the wheelchair are hit by the car, we see that it's Edge behind the wheel, and we see Paul Bearer is alive and in the backseat of the car. As he drives off, Kane throws a tantrum as we fade to black. Dave Meltzer on the Edge Kane story so far says, quote, talk about an angle where every week you get less interested in seeing them wrestle.
Yes,
nailed it, Dave.
100%. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the crowd earlier on, when Edge is up by the luxury suites with Paul Bearer in the wheelchair. Kane is at the entranceway, and they're talking back and forth. Like, the crowd is popping for all of us. They're popping for all of Edge's little jokes. The whole, should I let him go? They boo. Should I throw him down the stairs? They go nuts. When Edge successfully negotiates to get his shot for the world title, nobody reacts. Nobody reacts. Because the last thing anyone is thinking out of this is that a professional wrestling battle for the heavyweight championship of the world is the payoff for this. No one cares about wrestling in this story whatsoever. And really, on this entire show, wrestling is presented as the least important aspect of this 2-hour variety show on Sci-Fi. This is the beginning of SmackDown on Sci-Fi, they say multiple times.
King of the Ring results from Raw. Sheamus defeated Kofi. Drew McIntyre and Ezekiel Jackson went to a double countout.
Oh, God, you can't beat Zeke.
Nope. So that gives Sheamus a bye to the finals.
Because you couldn't just do, 4 first round, 2 semis, and a final. You had to have something ridiculous in it.
John Morrison beats Cody. Alberto Del Rio beat Daniel Bryan.
Ugh.
John Morrison beats Del Rio. And so the finals of the King of the Ring, 2 Raw guys, Sheamus and John Morrison, and Sheamus beats Morrison to win the King of the Ring.
Which is the B show again?
It's hard to tell. Favorite thing on this show, Adam? Favorite thing on the B show?
Oh, man. I guess it would just be the realization of what this was. Not that I was happy about it, but just the absurdity of it. I mean, I from an in-ring standpoint, it's the last couple of minutes, the last 3 minutes, the finishing stretch of Jack Swagger and Kofi Kingston. Like, that was
correct.
Great. It's the only really entertaining in-ring thing on this show. I guess also, again, it would just be, like I said, just seeing the versatility of Rey Mysterio. Yep. Like, this is my least favorite Rey Mysterio, in that it's Rey Mysterio just doing a WWE paint-by-numbers match when he's capable of so much more. But the fact that he's able to do that when we've seen so many other guys come from that other world, I think of like an Ultimo Dragon as one example, that just were not able to adapt what they did to this setting. He did it masterfully.
Honorable mention of the performance of Paul Bearer, as always.
Yes.
Tremendous. Worst thing on the show for you?
I mean, it's just that this story went on and on and on. The verbiage, the scripting. But again, it's so bad that it veers to being fun bad. Like, if I was watching it weekly, it would have driven me crazy. But doing a podcast about it, it's fun bad. Whereas I think the worst thing on this show was the entirety of the Hornswoggle being served a charred turkey and then shooting the eagle with a bow and arrow like that. Again, that's just the stuff that makes you embarrassed to admit you're a pro wrestling fan. But yeah, I can't say I need like the following week SmackDown, the randomizer, or from an intentionalizer. But if you are listening and you're thinking, I have not yet gone over to patreon.com/wrestling@random and become a supporter of the show, I didn't know I could become an intentionalizer and choose a show for Jeremy and Adam to watch. And you want to choose, I guess it would be the December 3rd episode of SmackDown for us to watch to see where this saga goes next. We'll do it. If you go with that tier, we'll do it.
With that, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a podcast.
We should also, by the way, tell people that they can watch the show on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, where I always like to give myself a quick fashion corner and point out what wrestling shirt I'm wearing, what relevant wrestling shirt to the show we're watching. You'll be shocked to know I have no shirt that is relevant to 2010 WWE SmackDown. It's always a CM Punk shirt. It's like the only thing I can bust out. He was not on this show. So instead, I'm just wearing a cool new badass Dump Matsumoto shirt that I just got.
Fine choice, as always. That's YouTube. Go over there and search for Wrestling at Random Podcast. We need the likes, the follows, the subscribes, and that's a great place to interact with the show as well. We love hearing the comments and responding to every single one. So definitely take a look at the entire back catalog of this free podcast if you're enjoying it. We have 5 seasons worth of stuff, and they're all evergreen content. It's all new to you. So welcome to our new listeners. Thank you for supporting us, to our regular listeners. And with that, we're going to call it a podcast. So Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Randomizer. I still, if we're doing this show 10 years from now, whether it be on air or off air, you and I are going to reference the moment where we each on our own realized that the Randomizer chose this episode of SmackDown out of 19,000 potential pro wrestling shows for us to watch. I'll be on my deathbed and I'll still be like, how the hell did that happen?
The Randomizer giveth and it taketh away. And so find out what it gives us.
A sense of humor.
Boy, does it ever. And so find out what it gives us next week. Talk to you again.